and you can look at the dials of life, literally career, training, nutrition. A lot of the time people want their dials up all the way. Greek yogurt, right? It's in the holy grail of Instagram. 0% Greek fat yogurt is like, it's like the most versatile thing.
Talk to me a little bit about the underfueling, the overtraining, and that kind of problem.
You have to do the hard shit, and that's probably like a quote on Instagram somewhere, like, do the hard work.
It will be now you've said it here. Yeah. We'll definitely repurpose that. That'll be a short.
That's it.
Yeah, Sammy, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, it's cool. This is a really important episode because we both work with fairly similar clients, and we're kind of seeing some fairly consistent problems in the industry, females in particular, aren't we, in terms of underfueling, overtraining, body image issues. So obviously there's lots there to unpack, which makes it a really important episode. So yeah, I thank you for being here, and I look forward to kind of getting into that with you. So we need to get this message out to more
Absolutely.
Girls.
Yeah, 100%. So much to get into.
So obviously there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, you probably have got the better idea of me than kind of what this problem is and where this problem stemmed from. So why don't you start by just kind of explaining to the viewers, like, what is this issue that we're seeing at the moment in the industry? Why has it maybe become a little bit more prevalent over the last few years? And where do you think maybe that's stemming from?
So I guess there's this societal ideal of a certain body type, and whether before it was kind of like the skinny ideal, thin was better. Now it's moved a little bit more to like a curvier female figure and kind of more of an athletic one, to be fair. So it's almost as if we've like moved the goalpost from one to the other. And although it seems like the other, where we are now, is more of a healthy one because it's one that involves training, and you actually probably have to fuel yourself a little bit better in order to kind of do that. But it's almost gone to the extreme of, I guess the underlying tone is still there of aesthetics is kind of the main focus. And sure, there might be some, like, of course, enjoyment of training along there, but to the extreme of some people use it as literally just a tool to manipulate like body composition, really going after it and really falling in love with training, which is always fantastic, but to the point where people are training so much and doing so many different types of things to partly because they enjoy it, but also I think there is still just this underlying, like, now the athletic figure. I have a client who's called it, like, I think it was like the X figure, so like broader shoulders, small waist, like bigger bum, bigger legs, which was like the first time I'd heard that, but it kind of makes sense, like, if you think about an athletic figure, and that's kind of where people are striving for. And I also think part of it is also like hustle culture and people wanting to excel in like multiple areas of their life and thinking that like more is better. I think that's such a big part of it.
So yeah, with that hustle, I think that's really true. I never really noticed that until recently, where it's like, I think girls in particular maybe feel a bit of a pressure to succeed in kind of multiple areas, including like athletic pursuits, even if it's not their full-time career. So yeah, why do you think that's maybe changed a little bit more over the last few years, or why do you think that's become so prevalent?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess this stereotypical female role would have been from, well, the classic, like, in the kitchen, looking after the kids. And I think as that stereotype is being broken and like glass roofs are being smashed in like professional lives and just in life in general, and I guess in the sporting world as well, even looking at like the sporting industry, how men's football, men's rugby is just a lot higher than females. And I think as these like boundaries are being broken, I think that's probably partly the reason is like females like, we can do this. I can be a girl boss, do whatever I want, little badass bitch. And people go for it. And with the creation of just loads of different exciting things, whether that's, well, I guess female participation in sport massively drops off at the age of 13. And so
interesting.
And even now, there's very few women that are in kind of team sports. And so I think now that these are becoming a lot more accessible, things like CrossFit, general functional fitness and the gym is becoming more popular and probably more cool as well. People are moving from team sports into these. So whether they'd gone from not really doing much sport growing up and are now kind of finding these new outlets, that likely helps with body composition, but also just like mindset and feeling good when they're training. And I wonder that's what almost like the new team sport is with more like individual stuff. And then of course you still get like high rocks and lots of other bits and bobs that are team stuff. And it's just a way of females getting back into training, which is amazing. Obviously, it's fantastic. As long as it doesn't go kind of to the extreme where I think we've kind of started seeing for sure. I never really thought about where it all comes from, but I reckon there's probably something in that.
Yeah. Have you seen kind of an increase like post-COVID in more people wanting that community and therefore an uptake in kind of CrossFit box or like F45 style classes and gyms? That's a way of finding that community?
I think so. Like it makes sense from people having to like do their hour of exercise outside on their own, or like a little HIIT class in their living room or kitchen. It makes sense that, I mean, as humans, we crave like other people. As from an evolutionary standpoint, it kind of makes sense. So I think it probably isn't. It would be interesting, like really cool to see the statistics on that. On like, and I guess CrossFit as a sport has massively grown. Boxes opening up like everywhere. And I think that probably is a big part of it, of people. Maybe for some it was their opportunity to actually fall in love with exercise. When no one, like if you were on furlough, if you didn't have much to do, that was a great opportunity to like dip your toe in. And then when things got busy and you're going back to the gym and it's like it becomes harder when you're training on your own, or if it's not as convenient, then it's stuff like F45 where you can book in and you get that bit of accountability, you get the camaraderie of other people, and it becomes so much more than just the training and than the exercise that you're doing. You get so much more out of it. So I reckon, it probably has increased since COVID.
I mean, that obviously sounds all really positive. There's a lot of really great things there. I think social media often gets kind of bashed a bit, doesn't it? We talk about the negatives, but one thing it has done is kind of make training and functional fitness and strength training cool in females, which is amazing. But it's not all positives though, is it? There is a few kind of like issues going on at the moment in the industry. So talk to me a little bit about the underfueling, the overtraining and that kind of problem.
It's definitely something I see a lot more now with just Gen Pop. I think historically it would have been for a lot of like elite athletes who are in the top of their game, like definitely more so in like endurance sports, and just seeing this low energy availability. But I think now with the popularity of training and aesthetics still being like a big focus, with elites you get aesthetics like as less of a thing. But I think now with that still being around and with an increase in training, an increase in output, we are definitely starting to see REDs as more of a common thing, like, well, ultimately driven by overtraining and under-consuming. And actually, there's been some more recent research around that it's not necessarily just about a low energy diet, actually low carb, and how carbohydrates, I think we kind of knew carbohydrates were important, but it has just proved that actually carbohydrates are hugely important when it comes to low energy availability and the impacts that it has on that, not just about necessarily the calories themselves. And good old diet culture has exiled so many different things, fats, carbohydrates, all that kind of stuff. And so with carbs still being demonized, I think we're continuing to see it more. And then of course with the overtraining side of it, where someone might be dipping their toe into CrossFit, they're also training for a marathon, and a solid chance they might be a coach as well, or they're just in another kind of a fast-paced job that might have them on their feet a lot. So their energy output is a lot, their stress levels are a lot, and they're ultimately just trying to do so many things all at once. That just kind of comes back to bite them in the arse.
Yeah. Let's for anyone that doesn't know, let's get a definition on REDs, if that's okay. Like what kind of is energy deficiency? What kind of numbers are we looking at, and what kind of carb intakes should these people be aiming for?
Yeah. So I guess low energy availability. So energy availability is when you take the amount of energy you have left over once exercise is completed. So of course, if you are training loads, your energy output is going to be considerably more, so you're likely left with less energy availability, and that energy is the energy we need to like regulate a menstrual cycle. I mean, it still happens in guys, but like sex hormones and like hair, skin, nails, we start to see kind of bone mineral density decrease, so risk of stress fractures and stuff like that start to increase. And so that's what we're kind of at risk of, and it's not necessarily just an acute thing. It can happen and can impact you for years to come. I was speaking to someone the other day who, I think she whether she had an official eating disorder, I'm not actually sure, but she definitely had disordered eating and was in like a bad place maybe 5, I think maybe even 7 years ago, and recently had a stress fracture, and she was told that it was likely because of back then and that was a good few years ago. So yeah, it's a hugely important thing that ultimately comes from overtraining, undereating, and can have just a massive impact for anyone. Yeah.
And where should someone kind of aim to be if they're a female listening and they're training however many times per week? What kind of rough formulas can we use to give someone an idea of where they should be at?
Yeah, it's a good question. Of course, it's going to differ from person to person, but a really simple one is to times your body weight by 22. And then if you times that by, so your physical activity level, so as a kind of a ballpark, I'd say times it by 1.3 is probably equivalent to about 10,000 steps. And I would generally look at steps and general activity levels outside of exercise first. So just generally looking at how sedentary you are. So if you're someone who's doing like 8,000, I'd maybe times it by 1.2-ish. Less, then you're really going to go a little bit less, up to kind of 1.4, 1.5 if you're at the like 15,000 mark. So that will get your energy expenditure without exercise. For females, I would usually add on, if someone is training 5 times a week, I'd probably add on maybe like 300 calories. It's probably relatively, it kind of depends what style of training they're doing. That's probably a rough formula that I'd go with. But the Harris Benedict will get a little bit more specific with height in there, but that's a really quick, easy one, just throwing numbers out there.
22 times body weight in kilograms or pounds?
Yeah, kilograms, yeah. That's a solid place to start, but the Harris Benedict will give you a little bit more. Plenty of calorie calculators out there. Figure out your maintenance. I think often people will use their like Apple Watches, Garmin, stuff like that, general just activity trackers to gauge how many calories they're burning. But particularly Apple Watches, I was looking at a study the other day, and they're basically just inconsistently like inaccurate. They're really good for tracking steps and pretty accurate with heart rate as well, actually. But for like measuring energy expenditure, it's just not accurate, and it's not even like, oh, they always overestimate. Sometimes it's underestimate. So it's that's where I guess numbers probably don't paint a massive picture, because there's so much, and often as well, like the more you do, the less you'll start to, your body will naturally try to reduce its energy expenditure elsewhere. So you might start to move your arms less when you're walking, sit down more, and they're just subconscious things that, from an evolutionary standpoint of view, our bodies will try and conserve as much energy as possible. So yeah, I think being realistic with the amount of training that you're doing and asking yourself, right, how are my stress levels? How is my sleep? How do I have any niggles going on? How is my body recovering? All of these signs can be that you're, good indicators of whether you're eating enough or not. That's a rough place to start. But ultimately, I think monitoring all of those things is probably going to be the biggest thing. I'm never one to get bogged down in numbers.
Yeah.
You don't need to be tracking. You can do if you want to and if it's helpful. But yeah, it's definitely not a necessity.
Yeah. I think that the likelihood of doing that formula and it not being more than you're consuming is obviously quite low for most females. So more food is probably going to be a good idea. 100%. But you kind of touched on it a little bit then, the whole kind of adaptive metabolism thing. I think that's something I'd love to get into for a few minutes, because so for a bit of context on this, I had a girl that I'm friends with. She was working with a different coach. This coach, did his calculations. I think it was 2,100 calories, 2,200 calories. Mm-hmm. Cool. That looks great on paper. He obviously hadn't kind of understood this fact that metabolism does adapt to being in a calorie deficit, and didn't appreciate that she was genuinely on 1,400 calories per day. Either didn't understand that or just didn't believe that she was genuinely eating that little. And she gained like 26 pounds in not that long. Mm-hmm. And obviously that is, she wasn't underweight, so it's not like she necessarily needed to gain weight. She had just body was beat up, plateaued, it's time to go back up in calories. Yeah. But because that metabolic adaptation wasn't taken into account, and there was a big jump that was made, she's obviously gained a lot of weight, has then become very unhappy. And of course, that's not what any girl wants to see on the scale. I'm not saying that you should be using the scale, but of course, a lot of people will jump on it. So for any girls listening that are like, okay, I'm doing this calculation, I'm doing this number, it's coming out at 2,000 whatever. That seems like a massive jump from the number that I've been at. What is metabolic adaptation, and how would someone maybe navigate that so that they don't gain more weight than they need to when building their calories back up? Yeah,
so it basically happens when you have been in an energy deficit. Like your body then acknowledges that there's less energy available and starts to slow things down to conserve as much energy as possible. So to be fair, and I guess from a scientific point of view, the research suggests that it's actually not a great deal. Like for some people it might be 100 calories, maybe 200, some people even less. So I think, again, from a practical standpoint, the best thing to do is actually just monitor it. And this is something I think is probably the most underrated thing, is actually just spending like a good few weeks just investigating what you're doing. Like, okay, right, I'm gonna eat number it is. I'm gonna monitor how I react in terms of like, how does my body react if we're looking at a body composition goal? How does it react? How does it make me feel? How does it make me interact with other areas of my life? How easy is it? And then that's a really good starting point. But I think the classic society of we want quick results, we want things now, that we just rush that bit massively. And so that's definitely something I do with clients with this discovery phase, where we actually don't really change that much. To be fair, realistically, we probably don't change that much, but they will look and see that we are changing a fair bit. Because if I was to say, right, we're going to do 4 weeks of not doing anything, they're obviously not, there's going to be minimal buy-in. Mm-hmm. So there will be things that we do, but still prefacing that as, okay, right, actually, this is where we learn. This is where we see what's going on right now. And from then we can start to change stuff. So whether it had been 2-3 weeks and you've started to increase, you started to put on body fat, then we're like, okay, I'm probably in an energy surplus. Okay, where could I reduce these calories then? Right, that's where I'm going to do it. I'm going to decrease that, and now I'm going to monitor it again. So it's a long process, and when people want the quick fixes, I think that's when it's so important to build rapport with clients and to trust that process of being like, right, this is going to be a long-term thing then, particularly if it sounds like if it's been on a journey where they've been on lower calories before. It needs to be probably more of a gradual thing to make it a sustainable thing. And fair play, there might be some who actually it doesn't need to be a sustainable thing if they're, whatever reason that might be. Usually it's just like a weight kind of making sport. But even then it's probably slightly questionable. But so yeah, that's a long answer to actually just monitor it and see how you go, and see how your body reacts.
Yeah, no, perfect. You've got to be curious, don't you, and be your own best scientist, for sure.
Exactly, 100%. Curiosity. Be curious is definitely a big one, like a buzzword, a bingo word that I say all the time. That curiosity, intent, trial, error, compromise, those are probably the few things that I say on repeat all the time with my clients. Like, can you just think of something else?
No,
that's it. Just do those things and you're grand.
Elaborate on the last one. Elaborate on compromise, if that's okay.
So let's go. So let's go for body composition goal. We'll say that's that. I mean, that's often the case for a lot of people. So trial and error. You try something, it doesn't work. You try something else, okay, it doesn't work. Maybe we try something that does work. Okay, actually no, I'm going to give a better example. So this is, I'd say I've been working on this example for the last 2 weeks. I say it a lot, and so I call it like the dials of life, right? So we're here in a podcast studio. Next to us, there's the roadcaster with all the little dials that you can turn up and you can turn down. Each one of those dials is an area of your life, right? So you might have a nutrient one, you might have a convenience one, you might have a money, you might have career, and there might be times in your life or meals in your life, literally breaking it down to certain situations where you're like, we're in London now, maybe you've just finished work, you've got like a client dinner to go to, or drink, something like that, and you've got 2 minutes to go and grab something. So convenience, we have to turn that dial up, right? And it might be that actually around us there's really not that much available. So we have to turn maybe it's the like nutrient density down, but actually if we're looking for this, like if we want to be in a calorie deficit, maybe it's not the most nutrient dense thing, but we can keep that calorie dial turned down. It might be that if we do that in the long run, we're going to leave us with like not getting in the nutrients that we need. So the compromise might be next time, right, I'm going to turn the nutrient dial up, and it might be that I turn the calorie dial up, so it ends up being a little bit more, but I've still got that convenience there. So it's understanding in certain situations, if you try something that doesn't work, there might be a compromise. That's a bit of a more complicated example, but if we take it back to, I've had this conversation with loads of people, often had it with myself, had it with my mum, Greek yogurt, right? Often the holy grail of Instagram. 0% Greek fat yogurt is like, I've seen it so much. Weetabix, it's like the most versatile thing, right? So you get 0%, you get 5% fat Greek yogurt, you get 10%. It might be that you enjoy Greek yogurt, but you don't like the taste of the 0% one. But you'd usually have the 10% or the full fat one. But actually you're trying to achieve this calorie deficit, and you know that it's probably not the most helpful thing. It's pretty energy dense and you don't get that much volume. Whereas the 0%, you get way more, a little bit more protein, but actually you just don't like it. So the compromise is the 5%. So you might have done the 0, you didn't like it, 10%, you know it's not great for your goal, so you compromise at the 5. That was a much simpler way of saying it. But I've been working on my little analogy, and literally it's so perfect to have this here. I can actually visualize the dials. That was dreamy. Yeah.
No, that was great. I hadn't really thought of it that way in kind of a dial. But yeah, that's whether we're talking about individual foods, the meal, or the bigger picture goal, I guess, of like trying to achieve different things, which sometimes don't always happen ideally at the same time.
Yeah, 100%. And we like mentioned it briefly when we were off air, and you can look at the dials of life, literally career, training, nutrition. A lot of the time people want their dials up all the way, right? But if we bring it back to like producing a podcast, if all the dials are up, it's going to end up shit, right? So some of them you need to turn down, and it might be that if you've got a super busy period at work, you might have to turn down your training dial. And we're trying to be a CrossFit athlete, we're trying to run a marathon, we're trying to excel in all of these areas. We can't have all those dials up all the time. And actually just acknowledging that we're going to have to turn them down at some point. If we want to do well in all of them, or at least one of them, we're going to have to turn down some. We're going to have to rest. We're going to have to dial training back in order to get the greatest output, to get the greatest overall final product. That's definitely something that we're going to have to do. And I think that's where a lot of people fall short, is being okay with turning those dials down and accepting that we can't train multiple times a week, multiple days, multiple times a day even, and go out and get your promotion, nail your family life, your social life, the relationships, do everything, and not burn yourself out.
Yeah. How do you get clients to kind of understand that? Or is that something that you think, as a coach, we can't really help with? The client either kind of understands that or they don't, or?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think you can judge the person, like you can judge their personality and see what you think is going to be best for them. There's definitely times probably in my like early coaching career where you can easily see what someone needs to do and you try and get them to do it and they just wouldn't. But actually being able to read them and understand the person that they are, some people might be okay with like, right, this is what I need to do. If someone's got them, if I'm there telling them to do something, they'll do it. Other people might be more resistant, or they're not the right kind of personality to do that. And so you go with, I guess another example is, if I've got a performance client with these people who are training loads and loads and they want to know about supplements straight away, right? Like that's often the place because they're cool, they're fun, but we need to like nail loads of the basics. But to get some buy-in, I'll often like give them vitamin D, omegas, creatine. That's probably where we start. They get a little bit of buy-in, and then further down the line you can bring stuff in. Same goes for this. Like you give them a little bit of kind of what they want, you let them do their thing, and then actually get to the point where they trust you enough, you've built that rapport with them that you can have that conversation. Equally, it might be that there's a bit of trial, error and compromise. They do it, they realise that actually this is shit, I can't do this. You almost have to have that, like, not lowest point, but you have to have something that makes you realise. And there'll be some people that, yes, you're there to coach them, but they're still not quite willing to accept that. And so they have to go on that journey, as you kind of say, and you're just there to support them at each point. And then it's not like hey, told you so. Again, maybe it is. Maybe you have that relationship where you can be like, joke's on you. But for most people, yeah, it's just supporting them at each point and being there when they do have that realization. And yeah, if you end up saying the same thing over and over again, it's probably not getting in. And you just got to try something new.
How would you set up a diet phase for a female client that does have a fat loss goal? They're like, I want to lose a little bit of body fat. They're not, massively overweight. They're maybe even in a healthy-ish range of body fat, but they just want to get a little bit leaner. But they are trying to crank those other dials up. They don't see themselves as an athlete, but they are definitely training like one. They maybe even do have some competitions coming up, whether that's a half marathon, a high rocks, whatever. They're trying to still have a social life. They're trying to push their career and study or work hard as well. What does that kind of look like? Like, what practical tips can you give someone for setting up that dieting phase?
So I'd start off, as I kind of mentioned, like the discovery phase of it. It's obviously going to also depend on their like dieting background, whether they have tried to lose weight previously or if they haven't. Mainly because people who have will have some preconceptions of what dieting looks like. Some people who haven't ever done it before, it's their first time doing it. Often you can get into it like much faster because they're not like emotionally tied to any kind of diet or anything like that. You can kind of just crack on and educate as you go. But for most people, they have realistically a lot of people looking for fat loss. I actually don't think I've ever had a female fat loss client who hasn't tried to lose fat before. I've definitely had guys, but definitely not female. So understanding where they've come from, I think is going to be a really helpful place to start. So for you, analysing what potential biases you might have if you're about to start a new phase, like what have you done before? What worked? What didn't work? Why did it work? Why did it not work? So you're going into it in a good, I guess, a non-biased approach. So even if it's like a week of just doing what you're doing now and seeing, but also just having a little bit of awareness and starting to understand why. And that's a big part of how we do things is I will start to unpick the why with a client of maybe they do X habit at X time. Like, is it an actual habit? Is it like an emotional thing? Is it for all these other reasons? And understanding the why, then it might put you in a better place to understand where we can do things differently and give you some scope to tweak things. Because if we just throw into like, right, this is where I am now. I've calculated my calories. I'm just going to crack on. There's a solid chance that things might not go the way you want them to, because you're kind of just putting a plaster on it. You're putting a band-aid on kind of unhelpful habits. So if you start to learn what those unhelpful habits are, you're in a better position to tweak them and then ultimately make it sustainable. So I'd start off with the discovery phase. I say kind of monitoring is doing it from a probably reflective practice. That's generally how I monitor stuff with clients, and asking them like what's going to be a helpful place to start. But and again, each individual will have previous experiences where maybe they don't like stepping on the scale, maybe they're happy to, and so figuring out what's best for you, but doing more of a holistic approach, like how stressed do I feel, how is this impacting my ability to just like live life, and doing monitoring through like a reflective practice, whether that's a weekly thing, like almost imagine like you would have a coach, whether you do that like journaling on a Sunday or maybe it's a daily practice, whatever that looks like. Will be super helpful. The next part is probably the most underrated part and definitely something I do a lot more now, and people are often quite hesitant to do it because it's kind of scary, but like periodizing fat loss, and that could literally be 2, 3, 4 weeks in a deficit in a fat loss phase, and then having like a week or a few days, whatever that's going to look like for the individual, at maintenance. That means you, particularly if you're someone who is doing multiple things, your training output is pretty high, it just first allows you to resaturate glycogen stores, so eating carbohydrates. So when we're looking at maintenance, ideally we want that to come mainly from carbohydrates, to resaturate our glycogen stores to how we store carbohydrates in our muscles. That's going to be helpful from a performance standpoint, so it doesn't just start to wind down and training just kind of plateau and start to dip. So that's helpful. It also gives you that psychological break of, right, I'm not dieting, but also I guess it's very easy for that to be like, well, it can be like a fuck it week. To be fair, I generally don't actually see that much, but I think it's probably because they have the buy-in of, right, this is how we're going to do things. So just holding yourself accountable, like, right, I know I'm going to eat a little bit more, but it's not just me, like, right, I'm going to go eat out every single day. And so that's helpful from that, like just a diet break point of view. Potentially metabolic adaptation, but probably it's not going to have a massive role to play. But also if we're looking for this kind of sustainable approach, having a week at maintenance means you know what maintenance is going to feel like. Because I'm sure you see it all the time with clients, that people who have yo-yo dieted before, maybe they're with another coach, they did really well, they lost loads of weight, and then like they're with you now because they kind of put it all back on. So we obviously want to be able to avoid that. So having a week at maintenance, like throughout the whole process, allows them to realize, right, this is what maintenance feels like. This is what it's like to not be in a calorie deficit and to have a little bit more food available to me. And that's a hugely helpful thing from a sustainability point of view, but probably one of the most underrated things that I don't think a lot of people will do, again, because it's just a scary thing and it seems like you're moving further away from your goal, but like you're just putting the brake on, like you're not moving further away, it's just pausing it a little bit, which ultimately in the long run is going to be helpful.
Allows you to move forwards more. Do you ever see with people, I see this quite a bit, where people really struggle with diet breaks. They need to feel like I'm on plan, right? They need to feel like it's a bit rigid. They need to feel like it's almost a bit difficult. And if they don't 100%. Feel like that, then it's just like, fuck it, right? So do you ever see that where people actually struggle with like a controlled maintenance diet week?
Definitely. And a lot of people do, because I think particularly with the training side of it, it's easy to train hard, right? And I think, again, hustle culture is like, I must train super hard all the time. And Instagram makes it look that way for sure. They might apply that into their like career as well. There's someone who's really, really driven. But actually when we look at nutrition, like we eat 3+ times a day, multiple times a day, and have done for literally forever. And so you naturally just can't apply that to nutrition. You can't do it. It doesn't work. So completely understand why people want to do it, but actually just explaining that it's not going to be helpful. And equally just being like, well, why don't you just give it a go? Give it a go for a week. What's the worst that can happen? Like realistically nothing. And again, it's the trial and error and compromise. Maybe they do it and they see that it's actually okay. Maybe they realize that there are a few parts that they were like, fuck it, I'm going to eat whatever I want to eat. And they're like, okay, cool. We have a learning point here. And go through the like living in the grey area for just the all or nothing of nutrition just rarely ever works. And I now work with like a fair amount of ex-athletes as well who have maybe been in a professional setup, whether that was years ago, a few years ago, whatever, and now they are just back in Gen Pop, but they've still got that athlete mentality. And it doesn't have to just be athletes. I think so many of us do have, anyone who's kind of a high performer often has a all or nothing mentality. And it just doesn't work because you can't be all the time. And if you're not all, then you're nothing. So actually just living in that grey area is where you see the most kind of beneficial. And I think it comes back to the trial and error compromise situation. You just got to give it a go. Be curious with it. Oh, there we go. Another bingo one. And just see how you go.
When you're working with clients and you're trying to get them to kind of understand that, do you find sometimes they have to have a diet break week here, a diet break week there? Like, is there a few times where they essentially fail at this before they start to understand it and get to kind of that buy-in? Yeah.
There's it again, classic depends on the client. And there might be some way you can do it tactically, like maybe they go on holiday and it makes sense to have a maintenance week then. And that helps them with a little bit more flexibility. But yeah, I definitely see it where people, you actually look at it and they think they're at maintenance week, and then you get into it and they're like, oh, they're still eating like minimal. And it's I guess it's never a case of judgment, and I'll always understand like probably why they've done it, and I again will always like to build rapport with someone to have that honest conversation, and for them to acknowledge that, okay, no, I didn't, and it's fine, like it's completely okay. Maybe we'll give it a go another time, maybe we'll try next week and see how that goes. And it's just, and I guess if someone who is doing this on their own is being able to hold yourself accountable to it, maybe you have a pal who's doing the same thing. Maybe that's a helpful way of doing it, and just seeing, okay, we're both going to have a week at maintenance, and just opening up that dialogue of, I'm actually struggling with this a little bit, I'm finding it hard to eat a little bit more, and then, okay, right, if I'm struggling to finding it hard to eat a little bit more now, this is just prefacing what the rest of my life is going to be like. So understanding that, and like, right, I'm going to do it now because it's going to help me in the long run, and accept that it's going to be difficult, and almost from the high performance mindset of like, it must be all the time, like it must be hard, right? This is the hard. Change that, like just reframe it in your mind, right? The challenge now is doing this. Like, it's not me going the other way. The challenge isn't being in a deficit. The challenge here is actually being at maintenance and reframing it. And for a lot of people who are like have a high performance mindset or are competitive, just gamifying stuff is a super helpful way of doing it. And yeah, it often works pretty well.
I love that. I've never thought to say that to the client, like, okay, this is the challenge now. Like, the challenge that you almost enjoyed and got excited for was the fact that it was a little bit difficult to stick with this deficit in a way. Yeah. So now, yeah, here it is. It's just a new challenge.
Yeah, cool. Exactly. Like, you like doing hard things? Here you go. Here's a hard thing.
Yeah, no, I love that. That's awesome. And what kind of numbers, carb intake wise, are we looking at? Obviously, again, lots of variables here, but for anyone listening going, okay, yeah, maybe I'm under my carbs. What kind of calculations can we throw out there?
Probably, so let's say we've got like your functional fitness athlete, someone training 4-5 times a week. I'd probably start off at about 3 grams of carbs per kilogram body weight. Someone who's maybe training a little bit more, training twice a day, I'd probably 5-ish. For endurance athletes, so someone who's training for a marathon, I'd probably go more like 5 to 6. If someone is playing a team sport, it'd probably just be a bit more periodized around a game situation, and it might be on the days that they're training less or they're not training. You might be able to reduce it a little bit, and then kind of increasing it a little bit more when they get to like match day. So yeah, I'd say 3 is a solid place to start. If you're doing a little bit more, increase it a little bit more. Again, I think just be curious with it of seeing what it's like to eat a little bit more. How do you perform? How does it make you feel? And yeah, going from there.
And obviously, if we do up carbs, there might be a little bit of weight gain, which is nothing to worry about. You know, a bit of glycogen, a bit of water. Why is it that if a little bit of weight gain does happen when we up carbs, why is that not a problem? Why is that not a bad thing? And what kind of potential weight increases might someone expect to see, just so they don't freak out if this does happen?
Yeah, it's just a case of water weight. So with 1 gram of carbs, we store 3 grams of water. So yeah, it likely is just you've just got a little bit of water retention, and it's not fat. It's nothing. It's just carbohydrates doing their thing.
Yeah, perfect.
That's it. Simple.
So if we've got a woman listening and she's like, okay, I'm happy with my body fat percentage, but I don't want it to go up. Mm-hmm. But I do think that I'm probably under fueling a little bit, and I'm scared of kind of upping those calories because I don't want to, I don't want to gain any body fat. How would we kind of address that? How would we kind of address that body image around, recovery, performance, under eating?
I guess there's two parts to it. First up is actually looking at the data of if it's a body fat percentage, it's understanding what that actually means. And it's a percentage, so it's going to be a percentage of your total body. So you can gain fat and your body fat percentage not actually change, because if you gain muscle with it as well, if you just generally gain weight, because it's a percentage, if you gain muscle too, it might not change. So sometimes you do have to gain fat, but actually the percentage won't change. But that's just more like the nitty gritty and people understanding that. I guess the bigger picture is ultimately gaining fat is scary. And I think a really easy thing to do is write a pro and con list of like, okay, what are the pros of me actually increasing what I'm eating? Likely going to be like greater performance, greater output, better recovery, probably more flexibility in terms of what you're eating, better social life, being able to be more present when you are out, not worrying about like calories that you're eating when you're at a restaurant, having to have like better conversations with friends. What are the cons? Might gain a little bit of body fat. Clothes might not fit me quite so well. That's probably it. Not much that goes into it. And if that is the case, again, I think reminding yourself that fat loss can always be there, and going in with that curiosity, right? I'm going to see how it goes. I know I can do fat loss. Most people can. So if I get there and I really, really hate it, I know that's still an option for me. Often people then realise that actually it's great and they have more energy and life is good. But I think just knowing that you can, the option is there, is a helpful place to be. But I think just really, this is a big thing of what I do with generally fat loss clients and people who come to me who are just generally struggling with how they look, is really starting to unpick body image and where their kind of thoughts, perceptions come from. Even to one of the exercises I'll get them to do is, what were you aware of like your body from like a 7-year-old, from like super early on? Then what about as like an early like a preteen? What about as a teen, an early adult, and where you are now? What were your perceptions of your body, and looking at the influences behind it? And usually there's like 4 main influences. So one being, I guess like people around you, and the environment that you're in. So whether that's conversations that you're having of in the office when everyone around you is on diet, or it's little comments, maybe you got a nickname that was around how you look. It might be an influence, just general, the societal influence, that classic like Barbie and Ken, literally from day dot when we're growing up, those are the people that you grew up with. Even like Cinderella and the ugly stepsisters, they were the baddies, they were ugly. It's just these little things that are engraved in how we perceive society. Then looking at, were there any kind of like body changes? Often those who were like overweight growing up often have a worse body image than now, even if they are now no longer overweight. So just kind of general body changes. And in the same way that someone who maybe once had acne, it's now cleared up, but they still have, they're still kind of aware of their skin and have a worse idea of what it looks like. And then also just some people are more predisposed to it, just basically on kind of personality and qualities like that. So if you unpick those kind of 4 areas and start to understand why you think the way you think, you can start to learn that actually they're not necessarily my thoughts. I'm here because of other influences. And once you know that, you've then got the power to change them. So doing that, realistically, that is the hard shit. It's not the eating more. It's the mindset of changing that. Okay, I can eat more, I can gain fat, and that's okay. And really starting to look at why you think the way that you do. And I guess a practical thing, so that's a lot of like deep work and lots of thought that goes into that. But a practical thing is, when we look at the overvaluation of shape and weight, that's generally what drives a negative body image. And so another analogy, it's a bit of a shit one to be fair, but I'm going to go with it anyway. So imagine, I don't even know where I came up with this, but imagine you're on the way to like a kid's birthday party that you've organised. You've got a bin bag and it's full of balloons. At the moment, the biggest balloon is your weight and your shape. In there as well, you've got other balloons that are a little bit smaller, that maybe you've got career, maybe you have training, you've got friends, you've got relationships, maybe you really like sewing or whatever it may be, all your other hobbies. And at the moment, we put most of our breath, most of our energy in the big balloon. And in order to deflate this, we need to put more energy, more breath into these other balloons. And naturally, there's only so much space in this bag of balloons that it will have to deflate the other balloon. So by putting more energy into the other areas of our life, outside of food and outside of training, we start to see ourselves as more than just the way we look or our training. And that's definitely a common question I ask is, right, okay, what are your hobbies? What do you like doing when you're not at the gym? And literally so many people are like, I don't know what I like
lift
doing.
weights and I meal prep.
Yeah, literally. And so so putting this energy into other areas of your life and starting to see you more just the way you look or the way you train is a massive thing of experiencing yourself other than just the way you look.
Yeah, no, I love that. I did a course quite a long time ago now with Luke Lerman of Muscle Nerds, if you're familiar with Luke, all things metabolic syndrome. And he started off with exactly that. He's going around the room, what's your hobby? And obviously it's a room full of coaches. So of course, everyone's going to be like, all right, lifting weights, that's my hobby. I'm a meathead. And I kind of clocked what he was doing. By the time he got to me, I was quite far back and I was like, baking. And he just went, you're the first person that's like not said lifting weights, like you all need to get hobbies. Then he was like, baking what? And I was like, yeah, normally they're like healthy-ish, macro friendly. Like, so even that isn't really a hobby in terms of it's still fitness industry related. So is that something you'll often try and get clients to do then, is like, okay, maybe swap that training or reduce that training a little bit and actually like, be curious with other areas of your life and find out kind of what your interests are away from health and fitness?
100%, yeah. I also do like a rate your life exercise where we go through, there's probably like 8 areas on there. Training will be on there. Career, like money, self-care, like personal development, lots of different areas, and getting people to rate their lives from a scale of 0 to 10. And on the ones that are a little bit lower, we can look at why they're lower, but what can we do to help increase those? And then get practical with it. Okay, right, what are some steps that you can do this week that are going to help to boost that? And again, it takes just the emphasis away from those other things. And it might be that actually, okay, you, rather than training on a Saturday for your 6th session of the week, maybe you actually go for a walk because that's really important for your headspace. Or maybe you go and meet your mum for coffee because your relationship with her is really important. And it might be that you, like, we don't necessarily look at training, again, because a lot of people are just very emotionally linked to that. And it might be that as a byproduct, they start to see that they don't need to train so much by putting more effort into these other areas. Again, it's going to depend on the person and what you think their kind of personality is like. But ultimately, yeah, we look at the areas and see which ones that they feel like they're not rating so highly. And looking at the limiting beliefs that go with those, often they're kind of hand in hand. And so we often would say like a limiting belief is something that's stopping a number from being any higher. But actually, the more I do it, I often see that the areas that someone holds or someone marks themselves like an 8 out of 10, like a higher score, often they have more limiting beliefs in those areas, which is is fascinating. And often it's because they give themselves or they put more effort into it. And so there's more opportunities to like hold yourself back, basically. And so by looking at these limiting beliefs, we can then again start to adjust what this rate your life scale is, which again just reduces the emphasis that we have on how we look. I
love that. I forgot what they're called, but is this kind of like one of those circles you pull out and like
yeah. I don't know what it's called when it ends up with like a little web.
Yeah.
Circle thing.
So something you do, or is we just like you just get people to put a number down 1 to 10?
Yeah, you can do it. Just put a number down.
Yeah.
It's like the big circle with little circles in between, and then there's the dots, and you can. Yeah. I don't know what's called.
Yeah, so cool little task that because it just really visually okay, my life's quite one dimensional, or like I'm lacking there. So
for sure. A pie chart is also another good one of so how much time and effort, energy, money do you put into these areas of your life? And then you can often see that gym is a big one. It might even be that the time you spend prepping or thinking about food is a big one. And then other areas are actually like a little bit smaller, or it's a good way just to gauge, take a step back. And I think it's so important to be honest with those. And I'll often ask them, so what, like kind of not necessarily what they want it to be, or just writing down the things that are important to them, and then being realistic with putting them in order. And then we go with, okay, well, how would you want that order to look like? And then again, we see this kind of gap that we need to bridge, and can come up with some practical solutions to do that.
Do you ever get clients that sign up to work with you thinking that they've got a performance-based or kind of a weight loss goal? They kind of go through your onboarding process. They're doing these tasks. You're having them reflect on how they perceive their body image at certain ages growing up. You're having them map out how they are kind of in different areas of their life. Do they ever turn around and go, well, I've got different goals now? Like, you've made me realize that maybe this wasn't that important to me, or I need to put more energy in over there. Does anyone ever kind of do a 180 on why they signed up with you?
All the time.
Yeah,
all the time. Which is kind of cool.
It's really cool.
Yeah, like I've had people full on like change careers. Like I'll wear multiple hats, and it might be that we dive into like career if that's a big focus for them. And so some people will literally just change what they're doing in relationships. But yeah, ultimately just because they realize they think they're unhappy. Because again, in society, we any kind of negative emotion, we often just reflect it back internally. So it could be that actually their relationship is really shit. They don't feel valued at work. They're whatever it may be, they're just not fulfilled in life. And it's just because, it's because I don't look a certain way. And I'll feel all of these things when I do look a certain way. And so for so many people, yeah, they never get, or they might have been there where they realize that they had been that kind of weight before and they weren't happy. Or we look at it, okay, so say maybe you were a certain way, that was when you were happiest, that was my happy weight. A lot of people say that, right? And then we're like, okay, cool, like what else was going on in my life? I hadn't had kids yet, my relationship was great, I was doing well at work, I had so much time. And then you look at them now like, they've just had a kid, they're not like in the job that they wanted to be in, loads of these other things. And you're like, okay, right, well,
was it the
kind
way?
of makes sense, yeah. Like if you're not happy in yourself now, and giving yourself or prioritizing you in order to be happy and making time for you to be happy, it makes sense that you're not. So I think, yeah, it definitely happens a lot of the time when we start doing stuff and people start to realize that actually, yeah, their goals do change, and it may be that they start to increase what they're eating and they start to see performance increase, and they're like, oh, I actually really want to go after this. Or actually, yeah, their goals just change entirely, and it also happens that a lot of the time, maybe not a lot of the time, but it's definitely happened a fair few times where we realise that actually a therapist would be better for you. Like for you to feel happy, this isn't to do with nutrition or how you look, but there's probably a fair bit of shit you need to unpick here. And going to do that with someone who can help you is going to be way more beneficial.
Yeah, 100%. At least once or twice a month, I have to I do a call with someone, a sales call, and I'm like, yeah, no, you need, not me, basically.
Yeah, for sure. And I think partly my like induction form, or the form I get people to fill out right at the start or before we even have like a discovery call, it does go into like a lot of stuff, and so I get to understand where they've come from, what their experience of dieting were like, but growing up, like what were the people around them doing? And so it kind of does set the tone a little bit. And even just that form, some people are like, oh, it highlighted quite a few things for me, and I realised that this is kind of different to what I thought. I was asking them the difficult questions straight away.
Yeah, straight off the bat.
Yeah.
You've listed some really awesome like tasks here. Obviously that last one, mapping out the different areas of your life, reflecting on the kind of the different perceptions of how you see yourself over the years. Are there any other like key questions or key tasks that you would say you would love for people to take away from this episode and do in a kind of a self-reflective manner?
I think just get deep. Like that, as you have to do the hard shit, and that's probably like a quote on Instagram somewhere, like do the hard work.
It will be now you've said it here. We'll definitely repurpose that. That'll be a short.
That's it. But you do, I think, so much to do with you. I guess body images isn't about your body; it's about your perception of your body. And there's so much that goes into that you do just have to put in the work. And I guess that's the biggest thing is actually just be okay with that and know, okay, this is another bingo word that is like a wellness word, a journey. Which I hate saying, but it is. It really is. Like it's not a linear process. There'll be steps forward, there'll be steps back. But as long as you're moving, that's still part of the journey. And just accepting that there's going to be days where you do still feel shit, where like we're human beings, we will always have negative emotions. And I think probably a misconception about a positive body image isn't necessarily about like loving your body. It's about actually accepting it and having more flexibility and neutrality with it, and knowing that there'll be days where like you feel like an actual potato, and you're like, well, that's okay. Like I don't have to change what I do today. I don't have to adjust my diet or go and train harder because I feel like an actual potato. It's like that will pass. Tomorrow I'll probably feel fine. In a few days I'll feel fine, knowing that it will pass. And it's just being able to ride that wave, and and the more that you're able to this is this is something like another thing, but I think body checking is probably a really easy one to stop doing, and acknowledging whether you look at yourself in a reflection when you walk past a window, or maybe you do like monitor your scale weight every day, or you flex in front of the mirror at the gym. Like, it can equally go the other way. If we're striving for a bit more flexible, like, neutrality, because often people, when they get like the body or what fits the ideal norm, is then put on a pedestal, right? Like we start to encourage it, people congratulate them. So actually just going with like neutrality and stopping the kind of the body checking. And I don't know where I was going with this, but yeah, body checking in general is great.
Oh, that's a great point.
The tangent came from somewhere else, but I don't know where else I wanted it to go. But yeah, thinking about body checking and knowing that it's likely not going to be a helpful thing, and is a really helpful thing just to help yourself feel better.
I mean, body checking stuff, it's definitely something that's been normalised, hasn't it? If you're taking selfies in the gym, you're filming your sets, like you're always doing it. I mean, have you ever kind of had a client where you've gone, do you know what, we really need to not do this? And have you ever like gone as far with them as saying like, hey, get rid of some mirrors, get rid of your scale? Like, is that something as drastic as you'd sometimes need to go with someone? Like, how much of a problem could this be?
Yeah, I think like understanding what they do and when they do it. But so another thing I'll do is a body checking diary. So get them to write down when they are doing it, the environment that they do it, and like the situation, whether it's I got up and I weighed myself, or I felt bloated so I like adjusted my trousers, or whatever it may be, or I was in the gym and I had just done some, I don't know, shoulder press, so I checked my shoulders, and understanding when they did it, but also the intentions behind it, like what were you looking to get from it, what did you actually get from it, so that can work on like a positive way. In terms of getting rid of scales, definitely, there'll be some where you just need to get rid. Like, you can put them in the other room. Like, you know, it's not a no. Like, it's not, I'm never going to weigh myself again. But them being in that bathroom and you getting on them every day is not going to be helpful. For some elements for body checking, it might be that we do like a quota. So it might be that you're allowed to check your reflection like 3 times in a day. Or it might be that we do it by like appointment only. So in the same way that you get your haircut at 7 p.m. and if you miss that appointment, then that's it, you don't get your haircut. So maybe that, okay, right, I'm allowed to add up my calories at whatever time it may be. And if I forget, then that's it, I don't get to do it. So rather than I've just eaten lunch, right, that's another 500 calories, whatever it may be. So either eliminating it altogether or reducing it, of I'm going to do it X amount of times, giving yourself a little quota, delaying it. So right, okay, I'm going to not do this now, but I can do it in 15 minutes, or appointment only. So sometimes it's not as extreme as just taking away completely. For some people, it might be the most helpful thing to do, or it might be just any one of those things.
Yeah, I like that. So I guess you're kind of just best matching where that client's at. Are they someone that would benefit more from a little bit of a stricter removal, or do they need that middle ground? Yeah,
for sure, and seeing that, and I guess coming back to probably more answering your question of the body checking and from a more like a flexing muscles kind of way, selfies, all that kind of stuff. I think you just have to have that honest conversation. Like, is this serving you? Do you think? Like, how does it make you feel? Right? How do you feel if you looked a certain way and then you were doing it? Getting them to think about that. I think a big one is getting people to look at their social media. And again, depending on the client, I can be like, hey, let me show me your Instagram. What are the first 5 people that come up on your stories? What are the first 5 images? Go on your explore page. What's there? Whether I do them with them or just get them to do it on their own, that's gonna depend. But a lot of the time it will be like just people in the gym. Yeah. Again, it's in the same way that people don't have many hobbies outside of training and fitness. Instagram is often a very accurate reflection of that. And so, okay, we're like, right, this isn't helping the problem. And a lot of people are like, well, it's inspiration. Fitspiration is a thing. But there's now actual studies that show that yes, it increases motivation to go and do these things, but it actually doesn't change people's action. So it isn't having any impact. Actually, it's just making you feel shit. So it's not serving you. So we can, and again, it's not we're never going to follow these people again, but you can easily follow them again, or maybe just mute them if it's a pal and you don't want to feel bad. So it's going to depend on the client, but I think definitely sometimes the positive body checking is equally just not as helpful, because it puts the ideal standard on a pedestal, even though it makes you feel good, but it becomes conditional. And I think that's a big one is hey, maybe I'd prefer to be smaller, but it's not the end of the world if I do. It's not that conditional kind of situation.
Yeah, that's a really important point, because people spend so much time on Instagram. Like if we are looking at making a mindset shift and identity change, you've got to consider what you're consuming through social media. Yeah,
100%. It's such a big part of our lives. We spend so much time on it, and just being able to cultivate a social media feed that actually does serve you. And I think following people who are of different body sizes, whether you follow someone who's in a bigger body, and it's definitely, and I was probably the same actually, of finding it uncomfortable to start with, why is this? but actually just like doing it and getting used to seeing different body types, and then you start to see that actually it's just a very normal thing. Like the fitness industry, no one, like, we don't all look a certain way. Anyone can be in a gym, anyone can train, but Instagram just makes it look a certain way. So like seeking out people who are in bigger bodies and are on a similar journey to you and who are maybe ahead of you in your journey is a really helpful way. And it might seem uncomfortable and weird, but yeah, it's probably just a sign that you need to do it even more.
I love that. That's another great little task people can take away. So hopefully there's going to be a little bit of journaling, mapping, and some Instagram unfollows that 100%. Occur from this episode.
Definitely.
What 3 things would you just love all women out there that are into their health and fitness to know about nutrition, body image, or training, or maybe not necessarily things that you'd like them to know, but like mindset shifts you'd like them to have? Like, what are kind of the 2 or 3 main things? I
guess I'll bring it back to my little like wellness bingo of be curious. Like, actually, no matter what you can do, and I guess there aren't really going to be specific things, but no matter what your goal is actually just be curious with it and give things a go. Trial, error, compromise. That's going to be a thing that's going to be hugely important. And just know that you can always do things differently. You are a product of your experiences, your perceptions, and you can change those things. You can change the way you think, and that is the real hardship.
I love that. And bonus point for more carbs.
Yeah, and just eat a little bit more carbs. Have a bagel.
Yeah, amazing. Sammy, where can people find out a little bit more about what you're up to? Obviously, you've got some exciting kind of projects coming up. Mm-hmm. So tell me a little bit about what they are with the sports teams, etc. And then where can people find out a bit more about those projects, yourself and your content?
So I am currently just putting together, it's going to be a pre-season program. So for those who, to be fair, it can be relevant to whether you are like off season in like a CrossFit functional fitness or an actual sports team. When you're in the off season now, pre-season is starting. It's going to be 6 weeks of coaching, lots of education just to understand where you should be now, tapping into loads of things like carbohydrate periodization, understanding what your individual energy demands are, all that kind of stuff, the good stuff, touching on supplements. I'm also hopefully, I've mind mapped, that's as far as we've got with a body image course and a relationship with food.
Oh, cool.
Which I would love it to be a cross between like group coaching and one-to-one. So somewhere in the middle of probably like 10-ish people. And so we can get into some of this deep shit, because often we have the same thoughts, and it's really helpful to do that in an environment that feels safe and encouraging. So yeah, it's very much a mind map, but I'd love it to be a thing when I have the time to put it together. But yeah, all of that will be on my Instagram, sammys.scoop. And more of everything we've discussed.
Yeah, I love that. And obviously you are no longer with your previous employer. So availability for new clients or any coaching program launches or anything people can check out if they're interested in working with you? Yeah,
so in the next kind of couple of months-ish, it's going to be mainly focused on the 6 weeks of pre-season programming. I might have 1 or 2 one-to-one spaces, but I'm kind of at capacity now, which is really exciting to be fair. So yeah, definitely if you're keen for coaching, get in touch like ASAP, and we can see what we can do. If you want to play a team sport, again, now is the time. But I'm always going to have a wait list anyway, so that'll be stuff that we can do.
Amazing. And is there anything that you'd like to add to just what we spoke about today? Anything that we've kind of missed or anything that's come to mind now that you'd like, I just want to share that to kind of round off that conversation?
I don't think so. I think carbs are a big one. Just go and eat some carbs, have a bowl of pasta, enjoy it, go and eat it with your family, enjoy everything that goes with that, the conversations you have, the taste, the carbs that are going to help you train. Also a hot cross bun, that is my number one favourite food. Yeah.
That's your thing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so 10 out of 10 would recommend. Get yourself a hot cross bun.
I love that. As far as summaries go, that's fantastic. What I'll maybe do, if you're happy to, is just write like a very short summary of kind of those key tasks and like actionable points that you've said today, and I'll get those in the show notes.
Yeah, for sure.
Because I don't know about you, I consume a lot of podcasts. Yeah. You don't always take action from them. I'd hate for that to be the same for anyone listening to this one, considering there is so many like amazing points in there. So if we can just have like a short bit of writing kind of explaining those key kind of tasks that you'd recommend people do to work on that body image, then I think that would be really, really powerful for people.
Yeah, put stuff into action for sure.
Amazing. I mean, thank you so much for coming on today. I really appreciate that. It's such an important topic, and I really, really enjoyed kind of getting into that with you. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Leo. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. Right, let's give it like 2 seconds, and then there we go. I've gone in and out, do an intro. In today's episode, I'm joined by Sammy Cooper. Sammy is a sports nutrition specialist that focuses on bridging the gap between the sports science of working with athletes and Gen Pop and body image, because those two aren't separate things. And in today's conversation, we're going to be talking about all things low energy availability, making sure you're consuming enough food to fuel your training, and why it's super important to kind of not overtrain and not underconsume. Carbs in particular is going to be a big focus on for us, and loads of awesome actionable takeaways on all things body image. So you can kind of focus on your health and fitness, but without it maybe becoming too much of a chore and something that actually starts to negatively impact your life, which is definitely a problem I'm seeing with a lot of clients, where unfortunately their health and fitness journey is not really adding too much. It's starting to become a bit negative, and that's obviously not what we want. So Sammy, thank you so much for being here today, and I look forward to kind of getting into all of that with you.
Thanks for having me.